Ready for a deep dive. We're really going deep this time, exploring a story that's, well, incredibly old, but somehow still feels so relevant today.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about Hannah.
Exactly, Hannah. Her story's incredible. We're talking infertility, a prayer so powerful it's echoed through history, even inspired names for generations. It's wild.
Centuries of echoes, right.
Uh-huh.
And we've got all these different pieces coming together to trace those echoes. We're working with the ancient text for Samuel, obviously, but also this sermon transcript from Reverend Dr. James Forbes. Powerful stuff.
And the reflections on that sermon, too, people were really moved. Okay, so scene setting time. Ancient Israel, Shiloh, big annual feast happening. Everyone's there. Hannah's there with her husband, Elkanah, but there's a problem. A big one, at least back then.
She couldn't have children, barren. And that wasn't just a personal thing back then, was it?
Oh, no. Socially. Huge deal. You'd think it was a mark against you or something. And to make it even worse, Elkanah's other wife, Peninnah, she's got kids, a house full of them.
And the text does not let us forget that, does it? All that emphasis on Peninnah, her fertility, you can practically feel the weight of that on Hannah.
It's heartbreaking, honestly. There's this one detail that always gets me. Peninnah would taunt her, right?
Yeah.
But not just any taunting. She'd offer Hannah the leftovers, like the scraps from her children's plates.
Adding insult to injury, literally. Such a power move, and it shows how deeply ingrained these social expectations were.
Exactly. And it gets to Hannah. It really does. The text says she was so distraught, so heartbroken that she couldn't even eat.
Yeah, and Elkanah, bless his heart, he tries to comfort her. "Why are you downhearted?" he asks. "Am I not more to you than 10 sons? But come on, nice sentiment, but
Totally misses the mark. It's not about him replacing children. It's this deeper longing, this societal pressure she's carrying.
and that's where we get to this turning point, that moment where everything shifts.
Hannah rose. Not just stood up, but rose. Powerful light.
Intense. The writer wants us to pay attention here. There's something happening that's bigger than just standing up. This is Hannah taking her plea straight to the top, straight to God. And for a woman, back then, daring doesn't even cover it.
And the way she prays, you can feel the raw emotion in every word. The text actually says her lips were trembling so much that Eli, the priest, he thinks she's drunk.
Mistaken identity, holy addition. But even in her distress, Hannah clarifies, she's not drunk, she's pouring out her soul to God. And it's in this moment of raw, desperate prayer that she makes a vow.
If God gives her a son, she'll dedicate him back to God's service.
Talk about a heavy promise, right? But that's how much it means to her. So there's Hannah, completely spent emotionally, laying it all out before God. But here's the thing. Right after this intense prayer, she changes.
It's like a weight lifts off her, right? She finally eats something. Her face isn't downcast anymore. It's definitely noticeable.
Some people, they say it's just because Eli finally gives her a blessing, go in peace, that sort of thing. But I think it's deeper than that, don't you?
Absolutely. It's like the act of prayer itself, of surrendering her pain, her desire. It brought her a kind of peace, even before she knows if it'll all work out the way she wants.
And the text is on board with this because of one subtle detail. On the way home, Hannah's leading the procession.
Instead of, trailing behind, lost in her grief like usual. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes.
Totally. She's embodying that internal shift, that Hannah Rose moment.
But we can't forget the miracle. It does happen. Hannah conceives. She gives birth to a son.
And what does she name him? Samuel,
Yeah.
which means God has heard. Talk about a name with layers of meaning. She's marking this experience, her faith, in his very name.
So we've got this desperate plea, this internal shift, a miracle birth, and incredible stuff. But what's even more fascinating is how this ancient story still resonates with people thousands of years later. And that's where Reverend Dr. Forbes comes in with his sermon. It's like Hannah's story is a launch pad, right? This ancient text propelling us into a 21st century sermon. Reverend Dr. Forbes, he had this way of captivating an audience.
Oh, for sure. And he takes this story, this ancient story, and makes it feel so immediate, so relevant. He talks about how everyone's got their problematics.
Problematics, love that. He's talking about those struggles we all face, right? Those moments where you feel stuck, overwhelmed.
Exactly. And initially, he thought about preaching Hannah's story as this Cinderella moment, Everything works out perfectly in the end.
Yeah.
But then,
It gets deeper. He acknowledges that not everyone who prays with that same raw intensity, that same desperation, gets what they want.
and that's where his interpretation takes this turn, this fascinating turn. He says the real Hannah Rose moment. And I love how he phrases it like that. It's not actually about Samuel's birth at all.
It's about the rising, that internal shift, that act of surrender. It's about recognizing our deepest desires, our hurts, and offering them up.
And finding victory in that act of surrender, whether or not the outcome is what we hoped for. And he makes it so vivid. He brings you right into that emotional space with Hannah. Her tears, that trembling lip.
Even Eli, the priest, misinterpreting her prayer as drunkenness, shows how completely she surrenders to that moment with God.
Totally. He's speaking to that universal experience, right? That feeling of being completely lost, hopeless. We've all been there.
And he's saying, look to Hannah in those moments. Find inspiration in her courage, her willingness to rise, even with doubt swirling around, even when it's scary.
And get this, to really drive the point home, he brings in a liturgical dancer.
No way.
Yeah, to embody Hannah's transformation.
Oh,
Talk about
yeah,
powerful.
that's incredible. Sometimes words aren't enough. You need that visual, that visceral experience.
Exactly. It's how we connect. We're wired for stories. They help us make sense of the world, find our place in it.
But it's more than just a personal story, right? Forbes, he takes this intimate moment with Hannah and gives it this bigger meaning.
He connects it to everything. Mary saying yes to carrying Jesus, even Jesus' resurrection. He's creating this larger narrative about what he calls rising situations.
Rising situations. Okay, I like it. What are those?
Those moments where individual action intersects with, like, the needs of humanity, something bigger, and sparks change. And when people step up, when they rise to the occasion, it inspires others to do the same.
And then he uses his own church as an example. They were going through a lot of uncertainty, a lot of change, and he connects that back to Hannah.
Acknowledging their own problematics, facing their challenges head on, and in doing so, becoming part of that larger story of hope and transformation. Powerful stuff.
So powerful. And the fact that people were so moved, so inspired that they started naming their daughters Hannah Rose.
Right. Talk about ripples. That's a sermon that's stuck with people.
It really is. But what do you think it is about Hannah's story that's so captivating? Why do you think it's resonated with people for literally centuries?
I think it's a lot of things, honestly. It's the universal longing, that willingness to bargain with something bigger than ourselves, the vulnerability, but it's also the action. Hannah, she doesn't wait around for things to happen to her. She gets up and acts. She rises to the challenge.
She takes control of her own narrative.
Exactly. And Forbes, he gets that. He unpacks those deeper layers of meaning, making it relevant for a modern audience. But his sermon, it's only one layer of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've also got these incredible reflections from his congregation, adding their voices to the mix. It's like
We're tracing the path of these ripples, how one story, one prayer can echo through time. So we've gone from ancient Israel, right, to a modern day sermon tracing Hannah's story, her desperation, the miracle. But it's like, it's not really an ending, is it? It's more like
an ellipsis. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like Reverend Dr. Forbes' sermon, it's this ripple, and we're seeing where it lands in these reflections from his congregation.
Exactly, and they're incredible, these reflections. You can tell how much that message of Hannah Rose resonated with people, and not always in the same way either.
Right. Some people, they took away that message of hope, the idea that, hey, maybe I can rise above my challenges too. But then others, especially women, they connected with that feeling of, I don't know.
Resilient.
Yes, exactly. Like Hannah, she became this mirror, reflecting their own struggles, their own little victories.
And he did that by taking this story, this ancient story, and making it speak to modern anxieties. And it wasn't just about relating to it either. People were naming their kids Hannah Rose.
Powerful. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was this, I don't know, this symbol, this reminder to be courageous, to have faith.
To have the audacity to hope, even when things are tough.
Totally. But what really struck me reading these reflections was the impact of that liturgical dancer. Remember Forbes talking about watching her movements, how she brought that transformation to life?
Oh, yeah, that was incredible.
It resonated with people. It wasn't just hearing the story. It was seeing it, feeling it, you know.
It's like that saying, people forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but you know the one.
But people will never forget how you made them feel.
Exactly. And that visual, it added a whole other layer of emotion. For sure. And isn't that the mark of a story that truly lasts? It's not just about the details. It's about how it makes you feel. It speaks to something universal in us.
Totally. And we all have those Hannah Rose moments, don't we? Those times when we're called to rise, even if we have no idea what we're doing.
We're all just figuring it out as we go. Right.
Exactly. And sometimes maybe the miracle isn't about getting what you wanted. Maybe it's about finding the courage to ask in the first place, to be vulnerable, to lay it all out there.
That's a powerful thought. It's about the journey, showing up, taking that step, even if you don't know where you'll land.
Trusting that sometimes the act of surrender That's the real victory.
Wow, I love that. The act of surrender is victory.